I'm sort of like the metaphysics guy of unity. I love to study it. I love to dig into it. And so my co-author, William Helen, and I put our heads together, and we put together this thing called Unity in A Course in Miracles, Understanding Their Common Path to Spiritual Awakening, because that's what both are about. And so he said we have to develop in ourselves this capacity to know ourselves. So that's fundamental to unity, is knowing yourself. Self-awareness leads to self-knowledge. Get that? And then the self-knowledge is what we can use to launch our way into our spiritual growth. And he said another person can suggest things, but we have to take the suggestions and apply our own understanding. They both use Christian terminology. However, in the process, they redefine that Christian terminology. And the way in which they redefine Christian terminology is quite similar. I'll give you an example. So both Unity and A Course in Miracles talk about Jesus, the man, and the Christ as something Jesus developed, that you and I can develop. And that Jesus Christ is not uniquely the Son of God, that we each have that inner divinity. Dualistic language to explain a non-dualistic system. Because in both systems, there is only one power and one presence. We learned that, right? There aren't opposing powers like we learned in traditional Christianity. And then they both recommend meditation, prayer, affirmations, and denials, and I will add forgiveness as a fundamental practice. Forgiveness is crucial, and forgiveness of self is very important. Fundamentally, one power, one presence, and that one power and one presence is everywhere totally present. There's not a piece of God in you, and a piece of God in you, and a piece of God in you, and a piece of God in you. If we add it all up, we have the totality of God, the totality of principle, the totality of God is present everywhere, and most importantly, at the point of view. There's not a spark of a divine in you. There isn't a wave. There isn't a drop of the divine in you. The totality of the divine is at the point of view, and it's your potential. That every thought you hold is remolding the neural pathways in your brain. And when you let go of an old belief, that neural pathway is broken down to build the new pathway. Isn't that interesting? And so do you see how that can relate to denials and affirmations? That we can use our thinking, feeling nature to restructure our own brains. Because when we remember the oneness we are, so we're never disconnected, but we might not be aware of our divinity. When we remember our divinity, we have access to wisdom, every principle, wisdom, wholeness, health, life, prosperity. We don't do begging prayers, right? We're not begging some God to change his or her mind. We are claiming our divinity and praying from that. And then the Course goes on to say, ask rather to receive what is already given, to accept what is already there. And then you have to live the truth. Fundamentally, you got to practice what you preach. Knowing and understand the laws of life, also called truth, are not enough. A person must live the truth that he or she knows. It begins with a very basic sort of intellectual understanding of truth that matures into spiritual understanding, and then from spiritual understanding we can learn to apply these truths in our life. Now, when from the point of view, from my personality, I'm taking all of my cues from what my senses are telling me rather than from the centered cue of the divine within me. That's all that means. And Charles called this the adverse ego. It is that the ego, its basic essence, is divine. And we never think of the ego that way. By reason of the ego's divinity, the ego makes and remakes as it wills. Do you notice you can do that? Do you notice that's how powerful you are? You are the king or queen of your own consciousness and of your life. You are making it and remaking it every day, every second. Your life doesn't happen to you. You are manifesting. Let's talk about that illusion thing and not being real. Well, in our relative existence, we exist, don't we? Okay? What it really means is not permanent. Not permanent. Changeable. The divine is permanent. So we have one system that teaches us how to express that Christ principle as Christ consciousness, mainly through the 12 powers. And we have another system that tells us how to undo what gets in the way, the negative ego. If you work them together, you have a synergy. You see that? So while they're not identical, they work together. So fundamentally, they're saying the same thing. The response we should train ourselves to do is to always respond in love, even at that moment when from our adverse ego we want to respond negatively. Next slide. So remember, know yourself and learn to apply what you know from that higher level of spiritual consciousness. Next slide. And remember, like Ellen says, be kind to one another. Love one another.